Hey guys, welcome to day 2 of remote learning and civics. Yesterday, we had some fill in the blank notes to do to continue on with our unit of Article 2, the executive branch. Today, we're going to review those notes, and then you have some questions to do to prepare for tomorrow's lesson, day 3, which will be about the Electoral College, how the president is elected. So, first, again, let's review our notes from yesterday. I'm going to share with you my screen here. So yesterday I had posted the unit notes so far. So you should have been up to roles and powers of the president in our unit notes. So if you did not have any of these notes, make sure you go back to yesterday's post and you catch up on your unit notes. And I told you that we'd be using our homework packet, Making Foreign Policy. You got this before break. So again, if you did not have this for whatever reason, if you were absent or if your cat ate your homework, then you have this posted on yesterday's post as well. So you're using this homework packet to complete the fill in the blank notes, which is all about foreign policy. Before break, we talked about foreign policy a little bit. We were introduced to what foreign policy means. Foreign meaning a country outside of our own, policy meaning the actions that our government takes. So foreign policy is how our government deals with other countries' governments, how we deal with other countries around the world. Before your reading gets into the different ways we interact with foreign countries, first it talks about the goals or the purposes of foreign policy. The first goal or purpose of foreign policy is national security, to keep our country safe, to protect our borders. So we do things to try to keep peace with other countries, to make friendships, alliances with other countries, or we deal with hostile or aggressive countries, again, to protect us and our country. The second goal of foreign policy in your homework packet was to encourage trade with other countries. Trade is the exchange of products or goods, and that helps to increase or bolster our economy here in our country. Our economy is the flow of money, the exchange of products, the buying and selling of goods and services. So if we are able to make trade agreements with other countries, that's going to help U.S. businesses, which also in turn helps U.S. workers. So encouraging trade with other countries, again, will help our country financially. It'll help us grow economically. The third goal of foreign policy was to promote world peace. So really, this ties in, I think, to everything else. Without world peace, without having peaceful relationships with foreign countries, then our nation is threatened, so our national security is threatened, and also our trade is going to be restricted, which doesn't allow our country to grow economically. And the fourth goal of foreign policy is to spread democracy. We like to say that democracy is the highest form of government that allows freedoms and rights to flourish. It allows people to prosper. So sometimes we will intervene around the world, intervene with foreign countries in order to topple oppressive governments, like autocratic governments, where one person is in complete control, like a dictatorship or absolute monarchy. Maybe communist or socialist countries, again, that more act like an oligarchy where a small group of people are in charge and kind of restrict the rights of the people. So there are 4 goals of foreign policy. Now let's talk about how we actually conduct foreign policy. How do we actually intervene and deal with countries around the world. So our list here in section 2, from A to G, it tends to go from more peaceful methods of conducting foreign policy to more aggressive. Kind of like a first resort, A through D would be peaceful tools of conducting foreign policy. Then we get to the last resorts. All right, E through G are the kind of our last resorts if we cannot deal with foreign countries positively. So the first one under our tools of foreign policy are treaties. And you may have noticed I didn't put a definition here. That's because we already have that definition earlier in our unit notes. We talked about the powers of the president. He or she has the power to make agreements with foreign countries. However, those agreements need to be approved by 2/3 of the Senate. That's a little bit different than letter B here. An executive agreement is an agreement with our president and the leader of another country that does not need Senate approval. The big difference here between a treaty and an executive agreement is kind of like the difference between a law and an executive action. Laws and treaties have a lot more power because they were approved by another branch of government. So it's really hard to go against a treaty or to go against a law. You would need to have congressional approval or Senate approval to change these things. Whereas executive agreements and executive actions, this is the president acting in a less binding way, because at any time, Congress could intervene to change what the president did. The Supreme Court could intervene and change what the president did, or we oftentimes see the next president undoing these executive actions and executive agreements. For example, when President Trump took office, he undid a lot of the executive agreements and executive actions of President Obama, the president before him. We also don't have a definition down for letter C, ambassadors. Again, that's because we already have that previously in our unit notes. An ambassador is somebody who represents our government in a foreign country. So we send ambassadors to almost every country around the world. There are a few countries that either we're very hostile with or we don't send ambassadors to, or we don't recognize certain countries as actually being the official country or government of that country. But most countries we have these open relationships with by using ambassadors. Then our last peaceful method of conducting foreign policy is providing financial aid, or sorry, foreign aid. Foreign aid could be financial, meaning that we use money to help support that country, but we can aid that country or help that country in other ways as well. We can provide food, perhaps they're in a drought, or they're having a famine, so they have a lack of water or food. We can help them in that way. Or maybe we provide military assistance, which could mean providing actual resources like tanks or weapons, or actually just people, using our military advisors to help their military grow and get organized. So we would use foreign aid for a number of different reasons, kind of as a way to help another country, because that way perhaps they will help us in return down the road. Now we're getting into the more aggressive forms of foreign policy. So we use A through D as peaceful methods to deal with foreign countries, to try to help them out and have them help us out in return. If that doesn't work, then we start to go to our last 3 tools of foreign policy. Now your reading had a difference between trade sanctions and embargoes, as trade sanctions is something that we do with another country, and embargo is something we join other countries in dealing with a country. I don't like those definitions, which is why I'm putting these definitions in our notes, because trade sanctions and embargoes could either be done just us and one other country, or it could be done with us and other countries against one other country. For example, for trade sanctions, which is restricting trade or limiting trade with another country, this could be done by just us, the United States, restricting trade with another country, or we could join in with a lot of our allies, and together we can restrict trade with another country. Again, embargo in your worksheet packet said that it's when we join another or other countries in stopping trade with another country. Not necessarily so. In common language, embargo is just stopping all trade with another country. Again, it could be just the US stopping trade with another country, or it could be a collection of countries, our allies joining together, grouping together to stop trade with another country. The reason why we would put trade sanctions and an embargo on another country is to hurt them economically, financially. Maybe we stop providing them with certain resources that they need. Maybe the country imports a lot of a certain product and they don't make that product at home. Well, if we limit trade or stop trade altogether, that's going to hurt their economy. It's going to hurt the lives of their citizens. So we try to hurt, I suppose, the country financially or economically to put pressure on that country to do what we want them to do. So if, for example, a country is making nuclear weapons and we don't like that, we might put trade sanctions on the country or an embargo on the country. We will limit trade with them or stop trade altogether. And if they suffer enough, the idea is that they will listen to our demands. They will stop whatever it is they're doing, or vice versa. They'll do what it is we're asking. The last resort on our list of tools of foreign policy is military force. Obviously, this is not what we want to do. We do not want to declare war or attack another country. We do not want to intervene and cause conflict. However, it is a tool of foreign policy. If we view another country as a threat to ourselves or to our allies, or if we view it as a threat to world peace, our national security, any of our goals of foreign policy, we always have that option to use military force. But since the United States is one of the, let me rephrase that, not one of the most powerful military in the world, I assume most countries don't want to get this far down this list. So at the trade sanctions and embargo stage, I think that sort of bullying that the US does, for lack of a better term, usually countries will listen because they don't want to escalate it to that point of military force, since we do have the most powerful military in the world. So there's our fill in the blank notes from yesterday. Hope you guys were able to complete that yesterday and you have all of the correct information. If you guys want to talk about any of the notes, if you're confused, then remember every day I have office hours at 1:20 p.m. until 2:05 p.m. on Zoom, and I post that ID and password daily. So if you want to talk about the notes, please feel free to check in later. Here is your work to set up tomorrow's lesson. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about the presidential election, aka the Electoral College. So I have some questions, fill in the blank questions here for you guys. So open up to your Bellwork section and put your answers for 1 through 5 in your Bellwork section, and we'll be checking that tomorrow to begin class. So go ahead and pause the video here and put the answers in your Bellwork section. Thanks, guys. Looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow.